Now, as you know, there is quite the debate in Australia, and thankfully it's been one we've been having here on Sky News for a long period of time, championed by my dear friend Chris Kenny and many others, which is, of course, for Australia to start a transition, a conversation about nuclear power. Because, of course, coal-fired power, well, we know where the market and state and federal government is on that. We also know their position on gas is not much better than the position of coal. But the reality is that you have to have baseload power. And as more and more things move towards being electrified on the grid, everything from the stove to the car to potentially manufacturing, you need even more energy than we currently are able to produce. So Peter Dutton has made it very clear that he thinks the conversation about nuclear is one that we should seriously think about. After all, if one of the reasons we're moving to wind and solar, as I explained last night, was to move us to a scenario of zero emissions, this would be the one that gets us to zero climate emissions the fastest. But Chris Bowen is trying to push back against this because his government and multiple state governments of multiple political stripes, they've chosen a winner here. And it's only the renewable sector. Renewables or bust is the deal that we have done with, among others, the United Nations. So yesterday, Chris Bowen was out there telling us that to have a nuclear power plant would cost $387 billion. Yet, as we've also shown you, the actual cost of energy transition under the system that Bowen is putting in place is, take your prediction, $1.5 T4 trillion from Net Zero Australia, or Bloomberg have reported that it's $1.9 trillion. Now, obviously, it was quite the coordinated attempt from Chris Bowen to change the subject from the disastrous Labor position on the overprotection of Qantas, the disastrous position of the way that the Labor Party has argued issues like the voice. So let's get it back onto the all fingers point at Dutton debate. So firstly, we had the announcement yesterday of this policy, and then just by luck and chance, he was booked on the ABC last night to appear on a panel discussion about, among other things, nuclear energy on QandA, where he repeated the scare.
I can't think of a worse fit for Australia than nuclear energy. It's extraordinarily expensive. We don't have a nuclear industry in Australia, so we'd be starting from scratch.
But how good was it? As you just saw an interview with Chris, but if you didn't, there was a 17-year-old who was able to run rings around the non-logic of this idea. Have a look at a little bit of common sense, not just being said on that program, but being applauded by what sounds like more than half of the audience.
The cost of nuclear is clearly highly contentious. And you know what the best way to find out the cost of nuclear energy is? It's to lift the nuclear energy ban, because at that point, you can actually see nuclear reactors, what they will cost, because at this stage, no company is able to propose for nuclear reactors to be built in this country.
Now, Will appearing on the show and pushing back against the orthodoxy of renewables or bust, regardless of the actual cost of them versus the potential cost, which we're told could be 18 times wrong, from Chris Bowen, of course, resulted in him getting an awful lot of hate on social media. Why are we listening to this kid? Why is this kid even invited to have an opinion on this? They do remember their views on Greta Thunberg, right? That when Greta had something to say, the world had to listen. But when this kid says something they don't want to hear, he must not speak at all. And sensing that they were losing the room, an independent economist who worked for the Climate Council, which means she's all in on the renewables or bust position, well, this is how she fought back against the clear logic of that young kid.
I will actually say I do support nuclear because the sun is all about nuclear power, and that's the only nuclear energy we absolutely need, and it has no waste. Look, I get a bit emotional here. I became a grandmother 10 days ago to the most beautiful baby girl, and all I can think about is her future.
I'm sorry? Someone was arguing facts. The other person was, well, just trying to play on emotion, and emotion has largely won the debate to this point, because if the cost of transition is almost $2 trillion on renewables or bust, and even the scariest price they can put on potential nuclear solutions is a fraction of that number, then perhaps Australians might want to have a look at that number. Now, if you would like to support what Will had to say, he's got a petition that is up on his website. The link is now freely available at nuclearforaustralia.com/petition, or I'll leave it up for you to QR code. If you just pause your TV feed right now, hold your phone up, take a photo of it, or press the little button. You know how QR codes work. That'll move you on to the petition. But we'll talk about that with Senator Matt Canavan, who I do promise is here tonight. I got my Matts mixed up last night. I apologise.